Welcome to the Better Than Rich Show with your hosts, Andrew Biggs and Mike Abramowitz. The Better Than Rich Show helps ambitious leaders who are on a mission to leave the world better than they found it, change their perspective on what's important, increase their income and impact, and systemize their life and business. If you've ever struggled with finding your purpose, have felt disconnected or distracted, or found yourself going through the motions, this show will remind you that what you do matters and will re-inspire you to chase your highest dreams. It's time for you to become better than rich.
Hello and welcome to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm your host, Andrew Biggs, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike Abramowitz. Mike, how are you doing today?
Always a great day, Andrew.
Indeed. Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to jam on today's topic. How do you create reports and analytics for your business? And, just to dive right in and just start adding value into people's lives. Reporting and analytics, no matter what sort of business you run, you can tell the health of your organization based upon certain metrics. For every single one of you, those metrics are going to be different. We'll talk about that. But if you don't have a really robust reporting and analytics process, then you really should consider getting one. And today should give you some building blocks for that. Mike, when you start to think about reports, analytics, metrics, these sorts of things, where does your mind go immediately? And then we can get into some nitty-gritty stuff. But I'd love for you to kick us off here.
Yeah, it obviously depends on the business, but if you're in sales, my mind immediately goes to the top of the funnel and collect as much data as possible in the top of the funnel. And that's, in the internal and also in the external operations. So my mind goes to if it's, in the external funnel of like client generation or something, it's like, okay, how many touches are we generating? How many, what's the conversion of those touches into appointments that are getting set up? From those appointments that are getting set up, how many are showing up? From those that are showing up, how many are being converted into closes or sales or transactions? So it's like, I want to know the data so that way I can see the numbers can give me clues as to the questions I need to ask. So the data gives me clues to the questions I need to ask, and the questions then become, what is causing these numbers? Where are the friction points in the user experience? So if we base it off of real data versus our feelings, then we can actually come up with some resolution versus just something that might feel good and we don't actually know. So the data is so important, in my opinion, when it comes to business analytics and running a profitable, effective business.
Right. And just to double click on that point, at its core, this is the philosophy, right, from Better Than Rich's sort of systematic content perspective. What we want to do is make decisions off of hard data, right? With more information, you're going to make better decisions. Now, that doesn't exclude intuition and having a really strong intuitive sense in business. We can talk about that on a later episode. This is how do I get hard data so that I have true facts to make better decisions off of. And so when you have that data and you have it at your fingertips and you're regularly looking at it, you're going to make better decisions. What I see too often is people come into a sales meeting, a staff meeting, something like that, and kind of have a general sense. Maybe they have one stat or two stats that they've been looking at. It's just the results, right? How much did we make this week? How much was our profit overall this month? And then that's basically how they run the meeting. They're like, hey guys, we're down, or hey, we're up. They actually have no idea why they're down, why they're up, how they got there, who did well, who didn't. And they're running that entire staff meeting off of kind of based on one stat or just based on how people feel. Hey guys, how's everyone doing today? How's everyone feeling today? And, I definitely don't want to discount the fact that we're all human beings and everyone's coming in with a unique situation. You need to ask that question to be in rapport with the people you lead. But also that shouldn't be the strategy for how you make decisions. You can't be making decisions in your business based off how people feel. It's good to always be there for people, but if if you're making business decisions off of how they feel, sometimes people feel really bad and business is great. And it's like, hey, why are you so upset? Actually, we're trending in the right direction. And then sometimes it's the opposite. People feel great and business is actually trending in the wrong direction. This is particularly true when you start to think about what are leading indicators versus trailing indicators. Maybe your bottom line, like sales number or profit number, is actually pretty good, but there's some red flags around the corner that if you don't fix in the next 3 months, you're going to have a problem in this staff meeting 3 months from now. So that's my little rant, Mike, but where do you want to take it next?
Yeah, it's important because especially if somebody's in charge of collecting the data that's in that staff meeting. My wife was in corporate recruiting for many years, and she would collect all this data and she would have to, get all these reports, and it would take her hours and hours of her time to collect the data. And then there would be nothing done with the data. So she felt like it was absolutely unnecessary. It's busy work. Why don't you just let me do my job and I'll just generate more revenue for the business versus collecting all this data that is not necessarily doing anything. It's just busy work and taking time. And there is truth to that. Like if they're not using the data. So the point of collecting the data is not to just collect the data. The point of collecting the data is to use it and bring it to a staff meeting where you can discuss it and dissect it and poke at it and ask questions. So the data is not the answers. The data gives you clues for you to ask certain questions. And using a specific example inside of a business. Let's say if you are running specifically a sales team. Let's say if you're running a sales team. Well, the data you're going to want to know is, okay, you come to a meeting, you do a team meeting or a staff meeting of some sort. What's the data? How many appointments, how many prospects do you currently have in your pipeline? How many prospects do you currently have in your pipeline? How many open tickets do you have that you haven't closed yet that are like kind of in queue? Then it's like, how many new appointments do you have currently on the schedule? How many appointments did you set up last week? How many appointments did you complete last week? How many orders did you place last week? How many new leads did you generate last week? So these are the numbers that you might want to, some people might call them KPIs or KRAs, key result areas, or key performance indicators. So you have them report their numbers. Once they report their numbers, you could have conversations around it. And what's nice about like Google Sheets or one of these technologies we could talk about in just a moment is you use conditional formatting. So let's say if they fill out a Google form with all these numbers before, as an example, they fill out all these numbers before the meeting starts and it auto populates into a spreadsheet. Now on this Google Sheet, you can use conditional formatting for yellow if it's above a certain number and it's red if it's below a certain number. So let's say if your baseline is 80% or higher is good and I want to recognize that, and 40% or lower is red and I want to explore that. So it's red, lower, explore, 80 higher, let's praise. Publicly praise, reprimand in private, just a thought for you. But the data you could still show on the screen and say, these are the numbers, and it'll automatically show the yellow and the red. And now you could have a conversation about it. That is the easiest way to run a staff meeting, looking at the metrics and looking at the data. So that's an example, one example of many when we could talk about how to use the data, how to collect the data, why it's important to collect the data, because then you could actually move the business.
Right. And what Mike just did there is he broke down a specific example, but regardless of it's sales or it's customer service or it's marketing or whatever it is, every single department of your business has those KPIs, has those KRAs that you just need to know what are your specific metrics by each department. And then design the ideal report. What sort of information would you want to be seeing on a daily basis? What sort of information would you want to be seeing on a weekly basis? What about a monthly basis? How does that compare to annual projections? And you want to have that all in one spot for each department, ideally, right? Maybe there's a couple reports depending on how complicated your business is per department, but the more you can get one report for each department, the better, right? The best thing to do is to make sure it's coming to you on a regular basis and it just lands in your inbox, or it just lands, automatically sends you a message in Slack or Teams or it suits you a text message or whatever it is in terms of your communication methodologies. But that should just hit your inbox, should hit the conversation every single morning, ideally automatically. So then you need to think, how do I actually do that? First, I need to create the KPIs. Second, I need to design the ideal report. Then I got to figure out how we're going to populate that data into that report on a daily basis. And then fourthly, I got to figure out how is it going to hit my inbox every single morning. And, Mike mentioned, self-reporting data. As a starting point, I think self-reporting data is really good. There can be some trips and traps with self-reporting data. Mainly just human error, right? People just either fat fingering something in, or B, not doing it, or C, like actively lying about their information. Oh yeah, I actually made 100 phone calls yesterday, and actually it turns out they made 7. So we have some dirty data in there. But as a starting point for every single person, I think when you can't get automatic data, self-reporting data is really good. So who would you want to be reporting? And what sort of tools could you use for them to send something in? Something like Google Forms, like Mike mentioned, is completely free and it's so underutilized. All you got to do is go in, create a few different reports, make sure everyone has access to the links, and tell them when they need to be sending in their information. And that's a really good starting point. We can get into more technical stuff in a bit, but Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, and to just bring it back to my wife Lindsay's example, she as a corporate recruiter, she would do like LinkedIn messages, or she would work with Indeed applications, and a lot of like Indeed applications, they already give you a lot of the analytics. They already give you a lot of the, how many resumes are coming in and whatnot. LinkedIn does that too. So she would, so then it would be, how many of them did she message? How many of them she had a conversation with? What was the conversion rate on those conversations? How many got set up for those interviews? So there was all of like this data. So yes, it was human. She had to like actually tally it up, and there wasn't a very great technology in place for her, which is partially why it was annoying, because she had to do it. And the other part of why it was even more annoying is nobody was looking at it. And that's the part that's really important. So it depends on the size of your business. Ideally, if you have a medium to large size business, you want to have everything as automated as possible. If you have more of a startup or a smaller size business, you just want to have something in place so that we're just not, shooting into the wind. I personally love Google Forms. I think Google Forms is fantastic. I think it's Google Sheets is, again, it's free. It makes it really easy, especially a lot of what you've taught me with Google Forms, like using data validation for like checkboxes and creating drop down menus. So that way they could only click what you want them to click. So that way it avoids a little bit of the human error. You could actually speak to that if you want. What are some strategies that you have implemented or you taught me to almost manipulate it a little bit so it avoids some of that fat fingering or some of that human error?
Right. So there's a lot of really cool tools. And if you spend a few hours on YouTube, just looking into Google Sheets and understanding it better, some of the MBAs in the audience right now are like, yeah, I get it. I took several courses on Excel or whatever. You guys might already know a lot of these things, but just if you didn't go to business school and you never really got comfortable with Excel, you never really got comfortable with Google Sheets, that's one little competency I would definitely recommend you get better at. I was doing a coaching client. I'll get into some specifics, in a second. But I was working with somebody and they were like, yeah, I'm just like intimidated by Google, Sheets and Excel. And I was like, it's one of those things, you do not need to be smart to know how to use Google Sheets, okay? So if you're in the audience, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's just simple. It's like, once you learn how to ride a bike, it's not hard. And that's what I told her. I was like, okay, let's literally share screens like now. I'll show you exactly how I did it. And she's like, oh, that's really easy. So understand that, you shouldn't be intimidated. You just need to learn it just like anything else in life. But a few things that I would say is using data validations, conditional formatting. I really love to use the conditional formatting where it'll color code things. And that way, at a glance, it'll show me exactly who needs to be praised, who needs to be, have a conversation with. I also really like that because I can use filters in Excel. So, that's another thing for you to look up is how to use filters. I also have been playing around with VLOOKUP, where you can create kind of like a chart and you can reference that chart back. And that's a really powerful tool if you really get sophisticated with how to do that. So if you spend, an hour or two poking around on YouTube saying like, how do I actually learn some of these tools? Like, formulas as a starting point, if you're not familiar with formulas, and then conditional formatting, data validation, and lastly, VLOOKUP if you want to get super fancy. But if you get really good at this, you can create your whole reporting structure just off of Google Forms, Google Sheets, and self-reporting data that people are keying in. And then next thing you know, you actually have reports that people want to use that are really useful for your business on a weekly basis.
And you hit it spot on, because YouTube, I literally had to do this 2 weeks ago because I thought I needed a pivot table for what I was trying to get done. And man, it was confusing me. So pivot tables are not, I'm still learning.
Pivot table is another really good one. Yeah. Pivot tables if you want to get good at it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was interesting because ultimately what I wanted to have each individual. So let's say there's 100 different people entering in their own data into they're entering it into their own individual spreadsheet. And I want to have all of their individual information on their own individual spreadsheet going into a master spreadsheet, a master document. So that way I have an at a glance. So say there's 100 different spreadsheets for 100 different users. Each of them have their own thing. And then I just want an at a glance. So I had to figure out, okay, let's take a step back and figure out what is the formula? What makes sense? Like, how can I get a simple at a glance for this? And I was, YouTubing it. I was asking a couple friends. I thought I was going to need a pivot table, but it actually turned out, no, I just needed to use a simple
equal sign. And then just click on the boxes.
Yeah, it was, but there's an actual equal sign, and then you can click the document, and that brings that link, and it's equals that link, and then comma, then that cell with an exclamation point, and it just brings that information over, copy it over, boom, and now it's manually populating or automatically populating an at a glance, and once I figured it out and finished, I was like, man, I feel like I just won the Super Bowl, man. I was like, this is cool, this is fun.
Right.
But,
and then it's going to self-update every single time someone enters in one of those hundreds individual spreadsheets. Every single time one of those changes, your document's going to change. So just like, Mike has set that up basically at no cost. He has real-time data and insights in his business, and it's no wonder he's always at the top of the charts when it comes to competitions and wins all the trophies. And he's able to spend time with his family and travel and run a whole separate business. People ask, how do you do that all? Well, you need to think systematically. You need to set up how do I actually have information on my business and how it's going without being there 24/7 inside a physical office space, just observing people. This is especially true in a virtual setting. So this is really good. I'll do kind of a quick lesson here on, by the way, one other thing I'll say is there are business intelligence, kind of like reporting experts out there. You could even hire somebody off of Fiverr, off of Upwork, even if it's just for a one-time sort of one-off thing, pay them $200, $300, $500 to design these reports for you. And they'll actually do all that Google Sheets stuff for you. If you don't feel like, spending 6 hours on YouTube trying to figure it out. So you can just hire that out and someone will design really beautiful reports with you with graphs and color codes and all these sorts of things. And I think it's just, you might say, oh, it's $500. I don't want to spend $500 on it. It's kind of one of the best $500 you could spend is just so you have complete analytics of what you're looking at in a really nice format. So that's one thing I would just share is you can hire out for that. Also, some of you are working in businesses where there's a lot of different softwares that you use, right? Now, one of the biggest problems in business is how to get one software to talk to another. Right? It's like this stat is over on here on this platform. This one's over here on this platform. What I need one-stop shop. I need an aggregate place to find these things. And you can also look at software tools like Domo, or I think one other one is Zoho. There's all sorts of different products out there that are like business analytics aggregation softwares. There's Smart Sheets, which is a really cool one that mostly works off of Google Sheets. These have various different prices. There's Tableau. There's like all sorts of different things you can check out. So if you want to, also spend some time researching actual software aggregators, and then what's cool is you can go into that, design the reports through that, and then it can connect to these different softwares via what's called an API, which is just basically the two computers talking to each other, the two software systems talking to each other. And so it's just constantly pulling that data. Maybe you set it up to ping it every 1 minute or 5 minutes or 60 minutes. And so every minute it's going to check and see if there were any updates on Salesforce, if there are any updates on this platform or that platform or whatever technology you're using, and it's automatically in real time going to be updating the charts and the reports. So you can go to your dashboard, see exactly what's happening in real time with your business. Again, depending on the scale of your business, depending on the war chest currently sitting in your bank account, and how much you think it's worth to spend on this, you can get really sophisticated to where you can see everything at a glance, and it's all kind of moderated through technology. You can completely remove the human element for error. So, Mike, I see you smiling over there. What are you smiling about?
That's why I love working with you, brother, because this is what you bring to me, because I've always worked inside of like my small business, and you teaching me how to corporatize my small business, because you had this experience of overseeing over 200 directly and 1,400 overall. Mm-hmm. So to be able to communicate with the hundreds of people, 1,500 plus people, you had to make sure it was very simple and very organized. And so I love hearing the way you're talking about this, because I'm like, all right, I'm not there with my smaller business, but conceptually, how can I bring that into my smaller business so I can get the exact same outcome, which is to free my time up and free up my intellectual capacity and my creative genius, so I can use that for other parts of analyzing the business and growing the business and evolving it. So sometimes we got to, corporatize our bit. I don't care if you're a solopreneur, just thinking about it in these terms, I think is really beneficial. So I that's like my nerd, my geek hat. I'm hearing you talk about all these technologies and stuff. I'm like, man, that's it's just impressive. So for me, what I receive from that is, if you're listening and you're like me a couple years ago when Andrew was teaching me a lot of this, I'm like, all right, what is my version of this? Like, what is the simple version of what Andrew just said? So we came up with our own like model of how to collect the data and how to input that data. And, and now we're starting to get a little bit more sophisticated as the time goes on, but it had a click for me. So one of the simple ways that we do it is, if the user, say if you have, using that number of 100, maybe it's 10, let's just go with 10. So you have 10 individuals that you want to get data from. So we want to make it as easy as possible for them to communicate their data. So let's say you have a platform, Telegram, Discord, WhatsApp, Slack, whatever it might be. You give them a template and you say, I need you to fill out this template. Maybe that template is in a Google form, or that template is inside of the app, the communication app. Either way, you give them a template. They input their data into that template. Then what I do is I have my virtual assistant. She goes in, if it's in like the Discord or in the Telegram or in the WhatsApp, she takes that and manually enters that into a spreadsheet. So even though it's not like sophisticated where all these softwares are communicating with another, it's getting the exact same outcome, which is the data goes into a spreadsheet that I can see at a glance. That's what matters most as the CEO of the enterprise. So I need to have an at a glance picture. So whether the VA does it or whatnot, what I didn't want to do and I don't want to do and I don't encourage is just giving access to those 10 people to input it directly into the spreadsheet. because what I've experienced in the past there is the spreadsheet gets messed up. Someone enters it into the wrong line. Somebody accidentally deletes somebody else's row, and it gets really messy. So I learned that the hard way a couple of times. So that's why it's important to not just give them access to the spreadsheet, give them access to either a form that auto-populates to a spreadsheet, or in the communication chat where you could have someone else input that. So then once you have it, and you have this for each department. So say if you have a department here, and let's say it's touch to interview, and then it's like interview to training, like onboarding, and then it's like training them into launching them into sales, right? And you have these different sectors of the business. You're going to want to have a different sheet or a different tab for each of those departments, because there's going to be different metrics to analyze there. It's a very simple way. You just want to try to think about, what are the KRAs? What are the points of data that you want to know? And what's interesting is I did this exercise with my staff. I said, what are all the possible data points? We made a giant list for every single department. What are all the possible pieces of data? And we came up with, for 4 departments, there must be over 100 different data points that we could collect. I said, great, go ahead and bold your top 3 to 5. That would be the 20% that moves 80%. Like, if we knew what these 20% were, then we could use those and leverage them to move 80% of the business. That's what they did. Said, cool. That's what we're going to track to start. So then we put the spreadsheet, the tabs and the spreadsheets and systems in place based upon just the 20% that moves the 80% of the business. And we're starting there in some of these new systems that we're putting in place.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, so many people underestimate just how detail oriented you could get with things. And what I love about that is you got detail oriented, but then you still went big picture. And it's like, what we want to do with this reporting is sometimes we want to be very like panoramic in our view, and sometimes we want to like really zoom in. And just the process by which you guys were able to come up with 100 different KPIs potentially that you could track, and maybe eventually it would be good to track all of them, right? Now you also need to figure out what's like the one bite of the apple that we can comfortably take a bite of this quarter or this year and kind of do it intelligently. But I think in general, the general rule is more data, the better, right? And sometimes people actually undercomplicate this sometimes. And there's like, well, all I need is this, this, and this. And it's like, well, sure, if you want to get to a certain point and just, stay at making 6 figures a year. But if you want to get into, making $500,000, $1 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, and so on and so forth, then we should be thinking differently. And so inviting people into that is super important. Well, cool. I think this is some really good stuff. By the way, a couple of comments here in real time. By the way, if you're listening to the recording, you can join us live every Thursday at noon Eastern. We record these and they stream live onto our Facebook group, The Better Than Rich Show. So if you want to join that group, you can always watch live and interact with us in the comments. Pressy Martinez asked, what would you look for the product that can help find automatic real-time data? I dropped a tool there. Basically, what you want to look for is anything around business intelligence software, right? So I just found an article, dropped it in there for the top 12 business intelligence softwares, and just check them out. You're going to find different price points, different licensing agreements, and different things like that around those. Some of them are going to be hundreds or thousands of dollars. Some of them might have a much lower price point to get started. And maybe you're talking $25, $100 a month that could revolutionize your business. So, and also some other comments here. This is great value. This is what I'm looking at right now. It's a headache to get all these things set up, but it's so freeing when you can get it done. So I'm really feeling really good about this. I definitely think that there are probably some other things that we could chat on, but when it comes to this is a pretty good high-level overview of how you want to create reports. The last thing I'll just kind of share there is getting access to raw data. The way you want to think about this is, think about like how much data, like when someone says, how much data Facebook has on you, or how much data Jeff Bezos has on you? Like, what does that even mean? Really what it means is every single time there's like an interaction, it kind of is recorded as a row in an Excel spreadsheet, is the way you want to think about that. Now, is it actually recorded as a row in an Excel spreadsheet? Not really. It's recorded as a row of information in what's called a database, right? And so they have all these different types of databases that, you know, people can use depending on what sort of software coding languages that are created. But that's the way that they think, right? So when you click like on the Better Than Rich show, right, or subscribe, boom, that's a row of data that they now have on you, right? Now, you know, maybe you like that, maybe you don't, but the truth is what's happening is it's creating a row. When you click heart or like or whatever, it's saying user 1117654321 just liked this person, user 24750, their comment at this time. It was a video. This was their location when they did it, all of that. So when we can get to that level of granularity, like going back to the sales example, all right, how many phone calls were made today? Okay, that's great. What time were they made? Who were they made by? Who did they call? You know, was it successful or not? And then we can look and say, oh, wow, we're really successful when we call between 8 and 10 a.m., but from 3 to 5 p.m., we're very unsuccessful. And so you can start to make different choices about maybe when to run the meeting and when to encourage people to the phone, because we're looking at large sets of data that are collected over, you know, periods and periods of time that can add up. And then you can actually start to make business intelligence choices around it and say, oh, we're 67% more likely to get someone to pick up if we call, you know, before 9 a.m., before their day starts, or whatever. So collecting that raw data is so important. And so we need to be thinking about, how do I even design a process to start capturing it the way Facebook does, the way, you know, Jeff Bezos is doing it, but do it at a cost that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
And also, we attempted this when you brought this to me a couple years ago with like clock outs of shifts or appointments or presentations. And we were having this, and we had hundreds of points of data from all of our sales representatives clocking out of their appointments. So every single demo, I mean, we're doing hundreds of appointments. So we have all of these data points, and we would be able to look at the themes of what are the objections or concerns. That was one of the questions, like what objection or concerns, like a drop-down menu. What were items that they liked but didn't buy? And then we had like a whole, you know, we had a section of that. And so we had these, and then we would take that information, and that's what we used to run our sales meetings. So we would take that and run instructional topics or workshops based upon the feedback that we got from collecting that data. So it was kind of a pain to shift our culture to have every single representative and salesperson like enter this information in, but we helped inform them. It's like, we're not doing this to micromanage you. We're doing this so we can help you. And if we don't see what you need help with, then we actually don't know. So by us seeing it, we'll know. And then in turn, it's going to help you increase your results, increase your productivity, and help you get closer to your goals. So it was a partnership. So that way they were really doing it seriously. And we oftentimes shared with them all of the data, not the names, but just the data itself, so they can see, hey, this is adding up. Okay, I need to continue doing this because they're working on this behind the scenes. I think that little note right there is showing your team that you are doing something with the data, so they know it's not just a pain in the neck, that extra 30 or 60 seconds if you're having a user enter some of this in and it's actually being used. And if it's not being used, then maybe you'll question either, number one, do we really need it? Or number two is, how can we begin using it and making it meaningful?
Absolutely. Well, this was beautiful, man. I really enjoyed it. Anything else that you want to share with everybody before we send them on with their week?
I don't. If you understand CVI, I'm a banker innovator. So naturally, the numbers and the data and whatnot is where my advantage comes into play. So if you wanted to, arrange a conversation with myself or Andrew's taught me how to like tap into this creative genius. I think it makes sense to, hop on a discovery call with one of us and just, we could pick apart your business for 30 or 40 minutes and we could look at your KPIs or lack thereof and maybe help you out. And we just recently did this for one of our new clients, and they were like, oh my God, there's so much I didn't know. And it's always fun to kind of just poke around a little bit. So we'd be glad to do that for you. If that's something up your alley or something you're interested in, you can make your way to betterthanrich.com and, click the link there to arrange a complimentary discovery conversation.
Absolutely. And, one last shameless plug. We are also doing an event on all these topics coming up in Tampa here. So check that out as well on our website. But hey, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for listening. And remember to leave today better than you found it. We'll see you next week. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at betterthan_rich and join our Facebook group at the Better Than Rich Show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, leave today better than you found it.